Hello, and welcome to Enchantment of Eternity's review for Meridian, which is episode 8 of season 3 of Star Trek Deep Space Nine. This video is a part of a series of videos where I review episodes of Star Trek Deep Space Nine, one episode at a time. In this video, I cover the third season episode, Meridian. So Meridian is the episode where the Defiant goes into the Gamma Quadrant, do some exploring, and they discover a planet that appears out of nowhere, and they investigate its inhabitants, and apparently it phases in and out of physical reality, and it goes into this other dimension where it's non-corporeal, and apparently the planet is having problems retaining its physical form, and that there will only be there for 4 days, and they were gone for 60 years, and they're worried that the planet is starting to not be able to reform, and it might be stuck in this non-corporeal form. So Dax works with their head scientist to come up with a solution, and the two of them form a romance. They eventually do come up with the solution, but it requires the planet to go back into non-corporeal existence one more time, which will be gone for 60 years, and then from after it returns, it will be able to retain its physical form. However, during this time, Dax no longer wants to part from her new romance, and so at first he offers to leave the planet and go back and live on Deep Space Nine with her, but he's very sort of depressed, and he's not happy with this decision because there's very few people of his people left, and he doesn't want to abandon them, so Dax agrees to stay behind. Now, they were worried that she wouldn't be able to go into non-corporeal form, but Bashir comes up with this transporter treatment to scramble her molecules that will allow her to go back with them. So she says her goodbyes and asks for a 60-year leave of absence and goes off to live with this guy. However, when the planet tries to go into non-corporeal form, Bashir's treatment didn't work, and she acts like an anchor, and she nearly destroys the whole planet, and she's unable to go with them, and she has to be beamed back on a Defiant, and she's very sad about that. Meanwhile, on the station, a very rich guy has a thing on Kira. Kira pretends to be Odo's boyfriend in order to scare him away, but he then goes to Quark and offers him a large sum of money if he can come up with a custom holosuite program in which Major Kira is the starring character. And so Quark tries to do all these tricks to try to trick Kira into letting him do get a hollow image of her, but she catches on and threatens him, but he eventually comes up with a way to steal that knowledge, the information that he needs to create a hollow program of her, but she catches on. Odo catches him in the act, and instead of simply arresting him, they come up with a trick. And so when the rich guy goes to use his holosuite program, instead of finding an image of Kira, he sees an image of a woman with the head of Quark. And of course he's outraged, and Kira and Odo go in to laugh and gloat. So this is an episode that is hated. It's seen as one of the worst episodes of the show. And I think I myself have put it down as one of the worst episodes in the show before. But now I'm going to be a little bit, just a little bit, just a tinge controversial. Because I got to be honest. I'm not going to say what others think, or I'm not going to try to just say what I think others want to hear, or what want to make them happy. I will give my honest opinion on rewatching this episode, and that is, it's not as bad as people say it is. Now, before you go jumping on my back, I am not saying it's a good episode. But here's the thing, and again, I gotta be really honest. Going from season 1 to season 2, even in bad episodes like this one, the writing is just, the character writing is just so much better. For the most part. There's caveats to that in this episode, for sure. But here's the thing. Yes, the A-plot with Jadzia sucks. It's ridiculous. They did a terrible job of building in romance, and it comes off as a frivolous fling, and you do not buy for a single solitary second that Dax is willing to throw away her life and all of her friends that she knows just for this guy that she just met and knew for less than a couple of days. Like, it's utterly ridiculous. They don't sell it at all. The scenes with her and that storyline are mostly boring. Now, here's the catch. I like the B-plot. And I've said this before when I covered this episode. It was like, oh, I kind of like the B-plot. But here's the thing. After rewatching it just now, I don't kind of like the B-plot. I really like the B-plot. And I know this will, a lot of people will disagree with me on this one and will butt heads. But as I said, I'm going to be honest. Like, I think that B-plot was really enjoyable. It was funny, it was entertaining, and I think it had a very interesting, it was an interesting look, like a commentary on, like, deepfakes, you know, even though it was made, you know, a couple decades before deepfake was a thing. But you can apply it to that now, and it's very sort of interesting. It's first appearance of Jeffrey Combs in the Star Trek franchise. And I think he does a good job of playing a despicable rich man. We'll say he is a very good actor. He's very good at playing despicable characters. Now, even within that terrible A-plot, there are still some good character moments. There's one scene in particular that was really good. You know, I'm just saying. So, yeah, let's get into A-plot first, because I really don't have all that much to say about it, because it's, as I said, it's boring. You don't buy the relationship. It was funny because I was listening to Delta Flyers. I always bring them up. But anyway, I was listening to Delta Flyer podcast, and Terry Farrell said herself that she didn't buy the relationship. It didn't make any sense. They were just being like flirty teenagers. They weren't showing a romance. They were showing a fling. And she was going on a tirade about it. I was like, thank you. It was like it feels so vindicating that the actress herself who played this character is saying what everyone else is saying. She's not trying, because a lot of times actors will try to defend bad works, like the actors try to defend the bad writing in Game of Thrones season 8. Like, their acting isn't bad. The cinematography and all the production values aren't bad. It's the writing, and yet they're in denial because they put so much hard work in it, and they refuse to admit what they did is just a giant piece of shit. Not all of them. There's some, but they're hidden. Like, apparently there's an actor who hated the ending of Lost, who was in Lost, but they refuse to identify themselves because they don't want to create it. And that I can understand, too. They don't want to be seen as the bad guy. But it's so sort of gratifying that Terry Farrell Terry Farrell and Armin Shimon have not been shy of criticizing Deep Space Nine when appropriate, or although in Armin Shimmerman's case, a lot of times he does it when it's not appropriate, but that's another story. And Robert Duncan McNeil and Garrett Wang will often criticize Voyager as well. So they're open about when it. But this is the first time that she really tore into an episode in a way that, like, not just myself, but pretty much everyone agrees with. Like, and it's because it's undeniable. It's just undeniable that this romance is done terribly. Now, she said that she did enjoy working with this actor, and that, in fact, she had done a romance storyline with him before in some other show or movie or something. So they knew each other. But yeah, this now the actor. Oh, I'm gonna bring up the actor's name. I just know him as Goodwin. I just call him Goodwin. What is his name? Brett Cullen. And I was in the podcast, they were saying, oh yeah, he's been in a lot of movies like Batman Begins, and was he in Batman Begins? I'm not even sure, but they were naming all this shit, and I'm like, what are you guys talking about? He's Goodwin from Lost. Like, that's just who he is. Now, of course, maybe I'm just too much of a Lost fan. That's all I think of him as. But I mean, that character was only in like 4 episodes, but still, it's like he was one of the others. It was like an important character. It was like, and he was like scary. He was good in it, but it was like he's fucking Goodwin. And I didn't realize like that he was in this episode till I went back, like, you know, after some years later after I watched Lost, I went back and rewatched this episode. I'm like, hey, that's freaking Goodwin. I didn't know he was in this episode. He is kind of a typical handsome man actor, but he's okay. Yeah, he was in, apparently credits include The Outer Limits and Tales from the Crypt. But I don't remember him in those. But anyway, yeah, no, so he was fine. But the whole storyline with, the planet's stuck, we'll go in, we'll go out, really boring. But you get a couple nice character moments between Jadzia and Julian. Again, the season 3 is just doing such a good job of building these character interactions, and the one between her and Julian when he's sort of joking around of saying that she's not that good of a tango player. Quark is just letting her win because he's trying to get with her. She's like, he's not letting me win. It was good character interaction, but the one scene, I will stop beating around the bush and get to the one scene I was referring to that was actually a really good scene, was when Sisko is saying goodbye to Dax. Now, yes, I know that the scene is undermined by the fact that you know for a fact that Jadzia is not going anywhere, and the whole goodbye scene is kind of pointless because she's actually not leaving, and it's obvious that they're not going to write her off the show. But it's still the way that Avery Brooks and Terry Farrell acted it was so good. And it made me think of a better episode. It made me think of the episode Rejoined, which is a far superior episode in every way. It's the better Jadzia romance episode. It's so much better written. And there's a scene in that episode where Sisko is an even better scene where he's like, if this is what you really want, I will back you all the way. Amazing scene. But I'll get more to that when I get to that to that episode. But this at least was well acted. You can see them tearing up, and I almost got teary-eyed myself, even though I know, of course, they're not going anywhere. I know that she's staying right where she is. But it was still the way they performed it, and you believe their sorrow. And he was like, "Oh, I'm gonna miss you, old man." It was it was touching. It was good performance. It was a really good scene. Everything in it was very, very well done, I should say. But as I said, it's undermined by the fact that she's not leaving, and the storyline overall was useless. And here's the thing. When Terry Farrell was describing just how pointless, they're just flirting with each other, just counting each other's spots and feeding each other, and he's forcing her to climb a tree when she's not comfortable with it, what the hell? And Robert Duncan McNeil was like, they only have 40 minutes to tell a love story. That's not enough time to tell a convincing love story. And Terry Farrell very rightfully said, actually, it is. They're just not doing a good job at it. 100%. 100%. In fact, me and my sister were just talking about yesterday's Enterprise, and she brought up the comparison to this episode, because in yesterday's Enterprise, it's only like a fraction of the episode. It's not even the main plot, but they managed to tell a very convincing romance story, two people meeting and falling in love, and you buy their romance. You buy that they would be willing to sacrifice their lives from each other in just a very short amount of time. And it wasn't even the main focus of the episode. They just did such a good job of writing for them and making their connection believable. And there's other episodes like City on the Edge of Forever. Like Kirk and Edith Keeler is described by many as one of the Kirk's true love, like the best romance that Kirk ever had. And she appears in maybe 1/4 of the episode, and that's being a little generous. And yet, they're able to form a romance in not even 40 minutes, more like 15 minutes. Or maybe 20 if you want to be really fair. But they're able to have a convincing... So the whole thing, it's not enough time to do a convincing romance. Not at all true. That is just a lame excuse. And I'm glad Terry Farrell called him out on that. Says, no, that is not true. You can do it. This is not how you do it. If you have very few precious time, you can't waste with scenes of them just sitting there making googly eyes at each other and like making out and saying, ooh, I want to count your spots. It's a fling. It's not a romance then. It's a fling. They're having a passionate, lust encounter, which, hey, don't get me wrong, nothing wrong with that, but they're selling it as if they're deeply in love and she wants to give up her entire life and everyone she knows, all of her friends, her entire life, because it would be totally different in 60 years for this guy that she just met. You gotta sell it differently. Like, you could have done this. Like, it could have been done. This is not how. And just all the scenes with them on the planet and the other leader and saying, oh, we're worried, I want you to fall in love with these other women, and he defies her and blah, blah, blah. Boring. It is very boring. But I will say this is the triumphant return of Dennis McCarthy. He hadn't done... This is the first episode soundtrack he did of Season 3. And it's probably because... And this is just I didn't read this anywhere. I'm just deducing this. It's probably because he was doing Star Trek Generations. Now, I talked about the writing of Generations was happening way... in the middle of Season 7 of TNG, which would have been Season 2 of DS9. But the writing is pretty much the first thing you do for a movie. The musical score is pretty much the last thing you do. It comes after the edit. And so this is a couple months before Generation came out. So I think that makes sense. Or at least when they were filming the first 7 episodes of Season 3 would have been in summer of 94, so that kind of makes, and it came out in November, I think, of 94, so that does make sense that they would be doing the score right around that time. And so he was off busy Generations, and that would be explain why he wasn't able to do any episodes until now. And by the way, Dennis McCarthy's score for Generations is the best score of any Next Generation film, but they should have kept him instead of Jerry Goldsmith, but I'm sorry, that's off topic. But this score, I don't know. So the score of this episode doesn't deserve the score. I'll put it that way, because I can't say that the score is bad. It's not that the score is bad, it's that it feels overpowering and like it's trying to do all the heavy lifting, because it's trying to play this romantic music and look like they're in love, but the romance is written so poorly, it's a dud, and you can tell. And so the music feels intrusive and like it's trying to push you in a direction that the story is not delivering. And that's not the music's fault. that is the fault of the scriptwriters. So I can't say that the music is bad. It's just this episode doesn't deserve this music, and the music isn't enough to save this terrible episode. So go over to the B storyline, the B plot. Forgetting about the whole storyline of the deepfake, and let's just focus on the Kira Odo stuff. Amazing! I've been really enjoying like the Kira and Odo interactions this season, and I think it's definitely like they're definitely like pushing it and way more than the first two seasons ever did. Like I talked about when I covered the episode The Collaborator, how Renee Aubergenois kind of ad-libbed this reaction when Kira said she was dating Burrell. What, you are? Like, or that she's in love with Burrell, and it was seen like jealousy, and that was not intended by the writers, but the writers saw that and they're like, hey, there's something here. Took it, ran with it, and so they're like exploring the Kira and Odo relationship. And in this episode, it is one of my favorite scenes in their relationship is when the Jeffrey Combs rich guy character comes in to hit on Kira when she's sitting with Odo, and she's like, oh, have you met Odo? He's my boyfriend, and takes his hand. It's such a funny scene. The chemistry, like the comedic timing between the actors is like so good, and it's also really powerful in Odo's character story because you can see like when she grabbed his hand that he physically flinched because he's like, oh, all these emotions are stirring up in him, and he didn't know how to handle it at first, and you see how shocked he was. I'm actually surprised that Jeffrey Combs' character bought it. It seemed rather obvious that Kira was just making that shit up on the spot. But he went along with it, and I love the way, Kira's like, isn't that right, sweetheart? And then Odo says something like, oh, absolutely. And then he looks at Jeffrey Combs and says, sweetheart. So good. It's so good. It was such a well-acted scene. It was hilarious. And then there's more funny scenes. Like when Quark is trying to take the hollow image of Kira, like with this weird camera thing, and Odo's like notices it, and she's like, oh, well, maybe he's just taking of both of us. He's like, no, every time I stand in front of you, he gets very irritated. You see Quark going like, come on, Odo, get out of the way. And then, oh God, I got it. So Kira goes up to him and snatches it from him, and he's like, oh, I'm just trying to do a holosuite program where people can go in ops and pretend they're part of the crew, whatever. And she's like, well, if they want to work with me, they can join the Bajoran militia. That way I can make sure that everyone in ops is wearing their uniform. And then Quark was trying to finagle, oh, you sure I couldn't do this, or blah blah blah, you can do this. And she says, let me put this in another way. If I catch you trying to take an image of me again with this thing, I will make you eat it. And then she throws it. And I love, it's such a tiny little subtle thing. But I start noticing, like, you've seen episodes so many times, you start to notice the little things. And what I think makes this scene hilarious, and it's such a small thing, probably most people wouldn't notice, is that from the time she throws the thing, and from the time you hear the sound effect of it clattering on the floor, is a lot longer than it should be. And I think that actually adds to the comedic timing. So let me see if I try to throw something. So if you go from the time that left my hand to the time you heard the sound, it's like less than a second. It was like an instant. It was a very small delay. But when she threw that thing, the holo camera, There was like, I didn't count exactly. I wanted to go back again and watch and count it, but see exactly how long it was. But I remember as I was watching it, thinking, like waiting for it. I was like, oh my god, how long is it going to take to hear that sound? It was like 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, 3 Mississippi, and then boom. And realistically, it would not take that thing that long to hit the ground. But what it's implying is that she threw it very, very far. That she just... And it took a long time. I don't know if it's just me. I think this was intentional on the sound design people. I think they wanted to add to it. Like, if it just hit the ground immediately, that would have been normal. But the fact that it took so long kind of adds to, like, just how far she threw it. And I don't know, for some reason, most people probably won't care, but I thought that was hilarious. I thought that added to the comedy. It's just everything about it is just so well. Like, the comedic timing in these scenes were just so good. So, getting into the whole deep fake thing. Now, I've heard some people say that seeing Quark's head on the body of a beautiful woman is just, they can't find that funny. It's just horrific and not something they'd want to see. And I can understand that. I mean, and I definitely, to be clear, I wouldn't personally, just me, I would not put it in the same category as Prophet and Lace. Like, that's totally different. That episode's offensive in the way that this episode isn't, because I think context matters, and the context of this is that Odo and Kira reprogrammed the holosuites to get back at Quark, because they saw, and to get back at the Jeffrey Combs, by the way, him as well. Well, I shouldn't say Jeffrey Combs. It's not the actor. It's the character he's playing, but I can't remember the character's name, so I'm just calling him Jeffrey Combs. But to get back at him as well, because he's being disgusting, and Quark's being disgusting, and they're both being disgusting by trying to create a hologram of Kira's that he can have repeated sex with, which is and this kind of gets back to the whole thing with Leah Brahms. I think I sort of mentioned this episode when I was talking about Booby Trap or Galaxy's Child, because that's that's different though. As I said, LaForge didn't ask for a sex toy. Like, he asked for an engineer to help him in the crisis. It just so happened the computer created her to be very flirty, and he ended up kissing her. And I think they're led to believe that that's as far as it went, though, that he just let it go. But then he had unrealistic expectations of meeting the real Leah Brahms. So, and also gets into the whole thing with, I think I might have talked about this in Hollow Pursuits, when Barclay was using a image of Troy in a very sexually suggestive way, and how offended she was by that. Rightfully so. And so I've heard some people defend that, saying it's not really them, but it gets in, like, so the whole thing with deep fakes is there's some celebrities that are basically saying, like, deep fakes equate to sexual assault or sexual harassment. And I know some people disagree with that, but I understand the but the invasiveness of that. Stealing your image and posing it over pornography to make it appear like, so I can see that's just not good. That's very questionable. And what Quark is attempting to do here is worse, because it's not just porn, it's an interactive hologram that in this setting, like, some of them are sentient. I mean, not yet. We had Moriarty already, and then you'll have the Doctor soon, and then Vic Fontaine later on, and but anyway, holograms are like almost like they're human, like different, and you have a one that's going to look exactly like her, that he's going to have, that's there and purposely for him to have repeated sex with. So that's worse than deep fake porn. So, and but on the other hand, like I can understand like a program that of the senior staff in Deep Space Nine that people would want to go and see themselves in ops. That actually makes sense if it wasn't just a bullshit cover for Quark to make a porn. That actually would make sense. But I think, of course, Kira and Odo are wise to not believe his bullshit and see right through it. Oh, by the way, god damn it, something else I forgot to mention about this scene where Odo and Kira confront Quark about trying to film Kira. The other thing about it, Quark keeps making up excuses. He says, "Oh, I was just making taking a picture of the ops. You guys just got in the way." And Odo goes, "Huh!" And then Quark says the thing about, "Oh, people just want to work with you in ops." And then Odo again goes, "Huh!" He makes that noise, "Huh!" Like the scoff. And it was just so, again, the comedic timing of that scene was just, of all these scenes with them, was just so perfect. And I like how Quark goes like, "Would you stop doing that?" And then I think Odo's response is, "Once you stop lying." Like, that was so great. Like, the comedic timing is so good. And yeah, I mean, I found that scene of the Quark head and holosuite, I found it funny mainly because it was Kira and Odo getting back at Quark. In fact, that's not this part of the scene I found most funny. Like, this part of the scene I found most funny is when Jeffrey Combs storms out and says, "I will ruin you, Quark," and Quark is confused and like, What do you mean? What did I do?" And then Kira and Odo step in, like, really smug looks in their face saying, "Oh, another satisfied customer, Quark." That was the funniest moment. That was the big laugh moment for me, because it was gratifying. It was gratifying to see Quark get his comeuppance. And Quark even says it early in the episode. He says, "Oh, the things I do for money." It just shows how unscrupulous he was being just for that bottom dollar. And because that guy was rich, he thought he could buy anything. And so it was gratifying on many levels to see Quark and Odo sock it to him. And totally fuck with them that way. I think it's very gratifying. So, I actually really like this B plot. I'm not gonna lie about it. I'm not gonna be dishonest. You may disagree with me if you want, but I gotta be honest. I love that B plot. So anyway, I would now like to thank all those who support me on Patreon. It's very much appreciated. It does help me continue with my channel. I'd like to give a big shout out to Antarius, Brandon Neilhouse, and Jordan Johnson. Thank you all so very, very much for your strong support. And I would also like to give a shout out to Tyler Cease, Benjamin Mead, Greg Marley, Francisco, Chuck Hooks, Kyrie091, Anthony D. Benedictus, Ricky, Matty Jester, Joel Lavals, Alessandro Miglaciro, Norman Buchwald, Stephen Kennedy, Brenton Berg, and Allison Fordyce. Thank you also very much for your support. So, I got a few Patreon comments on this episode. First comment is from Norman Buchwald, who says, "Said in the spirit of the first two lines of the musical, Bridgerdoon, Bridgerdoon, never mind, Spring Break, Jadzia. This is totally out of character. Between this and Second Blight, the writers of DS9 appear to not know how to write effective love at first sight. Granted, the occurrence is rare and harder to make credible, but to especially buy what the host gets from the symbiont with all these years of wisdoms, to do a sacrifice like this is preposterous. And one good scene between Cisco and her does not make up for this nonsense. Especially since the love interest is freaking Goodwin, LOL. There to trick her, of course. Smiley face. Does Dex go into affairs because she thinks she's supposed to? What is, that's because she's supposed to. Lost reference if you're not getting this. What is it with these others? Yeah, this is the first of Jeffrey Combs' many characters, including various Wayuns in all Trek. And yeah, Kira does put Quark and indirectly in his place. Granted, he doesn't know about it as of yet at the end, but we know he will. And the anomaly of the week is actually the main plot with the planet. But please, this is bad cheese, and this is above any other episode truly assassinates Jadzia's character more than first season problems ever did, and with Terry Farrell more comfortable in her role at this point. I give this 1 Quark head over Kira's body out of 10. Yeah, 1 out of 10. Yeah, I do agree. I do agree with you that one good scene does not make up for how weak that storyline is, but it doesn't make up entirely. But it's still a good scene. And yes, Goodwin as the others, trying to trick. He's trying to trick her because Goodwin tries to trick. He's doing it because she was on the list. Yeah. Anyway, next comment is from Stephen Kennedy, who says, "Oh yeah, by the way, sorry. Before I get to the next comment, let me backtrack a bit. You mentioned Bridgerton. I didn't do it in the tune of Bridgerton because I don't know the tune. I never heard of this musical. In fact, when I read your comment, I think there's another comment that mentions it as well. When I read those comments, I had to look it up. I've never heard of this before. Apparently, it's a classical movie, and it was a Broadway musical. And I think the movie came out in the 50s, so the musical must have been out around that time, or the 40s or something. I never heard of it. It was apparently about an Irish town that only appears every 100 years and involved romance or something. And apparently, Ira Stephen Bear based this episode off that movie because he was a huge fan of it, or the play, whatever, the musical. But he based it off of it, and oh god, I wish I had the direct quote. He had a quote about it that was like great. He was like, said something along the lines that I thought it would be good to do Bridgerton as a Deep Space Nine episode. I'm a fucking idiot. Something like, I'm paraphrasing. It's not his exact word, but it was definitely along those lines. Anyway, next comment is from Stephen Kennedy, who said, "Did Jadzia Dax forget to ask someone else for a 60-year leave of absence? The Symbiont Commission deserves to know that Jadzia was going to steal the Dax symbiont for 60 years. Maybe she was hoping Starfleet would tell them. Jadzia was going to be the Deep Space Nine version of Beverly Crusher on TNG. Lucky for us, she decided to settle for Worf. The only part of this horrible crap of bollocks is that I liked was the conversation with Julian and Benjamin. The part on the station saved this episode from a negative 15 out of 10. Don't cop out, Stephen. No lower than a 1. Jeffrey Combs' first appearance in the Star Trek franchise. It's a shame that this part of the story was in this horror of an episode. They will do it again in 5 episodes from now. Horrible A plot, great B plot. So my rating is 4. Quark's Vulcan Love Slave series was a massive hit. He was trying to repeat it with Orgy at Ops instead of different races attacking the staff of Deep Space Nine. They will have a magnificent time out of 10. Yes. A bit more generous to this episode. 4 out of 10. She's not stealing the symbiont. The symbiont's hers. Like, it doesn't belong to the symbiosis committee. They just facilitate when it's time to pass the symbiont on to someone else. So she's not stealing it, and they have no say in her going off to a non-corporeal for 60 years. So no one, it's none of their damn business. But that's just my understanding of it. I could be wrong. But yes. I don't think they mentioned Vulcan Love Slave yet. I think that comes later. But anyway. Next comment is from Brandon Neal Howes, who says, I don't even know where to start. Despite the Dominion telling Sisko to stay the fuck out of our territory, he ignores them and takes Defiant through the wormhole and ends up on the Brigadoon planet. 30 people living there, and nobody worries about the gene pool. Then Jadzia falls in love with a guy who has much personality as a block of wood. Because she has never climbed a tree before, now I realize why I had no luck in love. I can't climb a tree at all. I much prefer the Odo, Quark, and Kira plot, which is noteworthy for the first appearance of Jeffrey Combs playing a sleaze who wants a hollow porn image of Kira. It is a pity the story is played for laughs. There are numerous intellectual property issues which could have been raised but weren't. What happens to the Dax symbiont if Jadzia shifts to another dimension? The question is never addressed. I can't forgive this episode for being so damn lazy. Who refers to their sexual partner as lover? 2 messy cups of coffee out of 10. Actually, I have met someone before who referred to their sexual partner as a lover. I was like, oh, how's your friend? And she was like, he's not my friend, he's my lover. And not in the like sarcastic way either, like being dead serious. And I was like, okay. That's, so some people do. I guess it's probably not very common. So, nothing happens to her symbiont. Like, her symbiont is a part of her. Why would something different happen to her symbiont? It would still be Jadzia Dax, even if she's not corporeal. Anyway, it's like part of you doesn't, leave, like part of these other people. It's just because she's joined species doesn't mean it's still part of her. But anyway, sorry. Where else was I? Let's see. I like that it was played for laughs. I think it was effective comedy, and I still think there's some commentary there to be had. But it's not so much about intellectual property, I would say. It's more about privacy invasion, would be sort of, but I guess you could frame it that way. And I think they did touch on that a little bit. They did make it clear, unlike Hollow Pursuits didn't make it, or Galaxy's Child didn't make it clear that this is an absolute no-no to use someone's image in a Hollow program without their permission, especially for sexual purposes, which is implied in Hollow Pursuits, but outright stated in this episode, and but they didn't cite any specific laws. They just seemed to be at it. I mean, they were talking about arresting Quark. And the Kira's like, no, I got a better idea. Let's, fuck with this program. So they could have arrested him. I guess the charge could have been stealing her personal information, which he did in order to create, because he did it without her consent. Now, it would be interesting if you heard of other people who did give their consent to do it. But this was obviously, the whole point of it was to do it without her consent, which is similar to deep fakes. They never get the celebrity's consent to do that. So something along those lines. So it is, at the very least, considered unscrupulous. But anywho, yes. So, yeah, you mentioned Brigadoon at all. Yeah, never heard of it. Never heard of it. Anyway, thank you, patrons, so much for your comments. So my rating for Meridian out of 10 is going to be a 5. It's going to be a 5. Average. Yes, I know. What? You're giving this episode a 5. I'm sorry. I feel like I need to apologize, but I really like the B plot. I think the B plot is really good. I think if this the B plot is mainly the strength of why this gets, where the 5 points come from, or the 4 points come from, because otherwise it would be a 1. And maybe a 2, actually. Maybe if I was just judging the A plot, it would still get a 2, because I do like that scene with Jadzia and Sisko. I think it was very well acted, and it was very touching. It almost brought me to tears. So that might have been enough to bring that storyline up to a 2, and the other B plot is good. So and it is a B plot though, so it's not enough to give this like a positive rating. Like I can't give it a 7. If I was judging it just by the B plot, that would be a 7, possibly an 8, might even be an 8. I think I might give the B plot an 8, and the A plot would get a 2. So split the difference. It's a 5. It's a 5. I'm giving this a 5. God damn it. Anyway. Shouldn't be my most controversial decision ever. Giving Masks a 7 apparently is proving more controversial, but I fucking stand by that. That episode's not that bad. Anyway, so that is it for my review of Meridian. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video and would like to support my channel, you can do so by leaving a like, subscribing, leaving a comment. All those sort of things help me out a lot. And if you really would like to support me, you can do so by supporting me on Patreon. There'll be a link in the description below. There's different rewards for different tiers. I have a series of Patreon videos that I do only for Patreon, exclusively for Patreon supporters, and many other rewards such as pre-releases, requesting a video, stuff like that. So, let's see what's coming up next on my channel. Hold on, my computer is fighting with me. Alright, on Monday I'll be over on Patreon for a Patreon exclusive video revisiting my review for Star Trek Generations. That's right, Star Trek Generations came out after this episode aired. And on Wednesday, staying on Patreon for another revisit, this time revisiting my review for Defiant. Thursday, back here on my main channel for another new public review, reviewing the episode Fascination, another winner of an episode. Yeah. And then on Saturday, back over to Patreon again for another revisited, this time revisiting my review for Past Tense Parts 1 and 2. So that's what's coming up on my channel. Be sure to check it out as I continue to cover Star Trek Deep Space Nine, and pretty soon shall be starting Voyager and many other Star Trek videos as well. So be sure to subscribe so you can keep up with all of that. And thanks a lot for watching.